what we say is it's not what you earn, it's what you keep.
Feels like we're getting royally shafted. When I take the social temperature in my personal environment as well as here on TikTok, it seems that we are in a bath that is way too cold, simultaneously way too hot. There is no level of comfort at this point in time. In the headlines, we read of nothing but layoffs, and that's only the organizations that are big enough that they can actually make headlines. There's an untold number of small organizations, a dark number, if you will, where we don't know how many people are going to go into layoff status and therefore have to consume unemployment for the next 6 months, which is a time frame that runs out pretty quickly. At the same time, taxes are due. And when I listen to my personal environment as well as here on TikTok, it seems that those who have traditionally received a refund are now suddenly owing money. And most don't have the money to actually pay that amount, because those who earn less than $70,000 a year are usually living paycheck to paycheck and don't have the necessary emergency savings to pay for an emergency or the tax debt that suddenly is in existence. Now that goes back to 2017, but we can discuss that at length. It doesn't change the fact that people are now owing money that they don't have. In combination with employment that they don't have, even when we look at the recent numbers that American employers hired 335,000 individuals or something in that neighborhood, there is no grand reflection that those jobs actually are in the hospitality industry or in industries where the churn rate is much quicker and the income level is much lower, and people have to hold down 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet, and even there they barely get by. At the same time, prices are increasing, but so are corporate profits, and organizations excuse their behavior with fiduciary responsibility, which is the mass profit generation in conjunction with mass layoffs. Now, at some point, we are going to be pushed in the corner, so much so that we are at an inflection point where we have to admit to our defeat and accept our fate, cowering in the corner and let those who already have more than they will ever need run right over us, or we do what the Homo sapiens usually does, come out of that corner swinging.
The average American says they need to earn $233,000 a year to be financially comfortable. But in 2021, American workers on average made only $75,203 annually.
Americans are sort of looking at how much money they would like to have to be financially secure, and that ends up being basically 3 times what the average income is in this country. And to be essentially wealthy or really successful, it's magnitudes above that.
72% of Americans said they weren't financially secure given their current finances. And more than a quarter of Americans said they'll likely never be financially secure. With well over half of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, many are failing to meet some of their modest financial goals.
There are actually millions of people struggling. It's not something that people want to talk about, but if you are in a place where your financial security feels super precarious, you're not alone.
Let's do some budgeting. Americans working full-time earned a median monthly income of about $4,400 during the second quarter of 2023. The average worker takes home 75.2% of gross wages after taxes and benefits, shrinking the take-home pay to about $3,308. And that just isn't enough to cover the cost of living in America today. Take a look at some of the most essential expenses for Americans. The median monthly rent in the US is $2,029 as of June 2023. That amount already accounts for over 46% of the Americans' median pre-tax income. But most US agencies classify spending more than 30% of one's gross monthly income on rent as being rent-burdened. Meanwhile, the median mortgage payment for a 2,400 square foot house was $1,957 per month. However, a common rule of thumb advises spending 28% or less of your pre-tax income on mortgage payments. For the median gross monthly earnings, that translates to just $1,232.
I think sometimes we underestimate that if you have uncertainty in your housing, it causes uncertainty everywhere.
Housing is also the reason why cities have become more difficult to afford. Americans spend on average $690.75 on food every month, according to the latest data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. That amount is significantly higher than any of USDA's estimated grocery bills, including more generous and liberal food plans. Add the out-of-pocket health expenditures that cost the average Americans $96.42 every month, and you get a total expense of $2,816.17 for renters, and $2,744.17 for homeowners. That amount already accounts for 85% of the median take-home pay for average American renters, and over 82% for an average homeowner. This is excluding other essential expenses like transportation, childcare, and debt payments. Budgeting experts advise Americans to spend just 50% of their net income on essentials, 30% on wants, and 20% on savings or paying off debt. The Federal Reserve has implemented 11 interest rate hikes to combat inflation since March 2022. But more than a third of Americans said rising interest rates kept them from financial comfort. Credit is essential because Americans don't have the savings to cover big expenses. More than 40% of Americans blamed insufficient retirement funds or emergency savings as a reason for financial insecurity. More than half of Americans today said they didn't have at least 3 months of emergency expenses saved, including 22% that said they had no emergency savings at all. 36% of Americans said they had more credit card debt than emergency savings. According to Experian, an average American holds a debt balance of $96,371, which includes several loan products like credit cards, auto loans, and mortgages. More than a quarter of Americans said debt was what kept them from financial security. The fact that many Americans are living in financial insecurity poses a big risk to the economy as a whole. But the key to success comes down to budgeting.
Everyone should budget. What we say is it's not what you earn, it's what you keep. And so think about and have some transparency of where is your money going. And then make sure the budget that you have aligns with the goals that you wrote down.
There are actually millions of people struggling. It's not something that people want to talk about, but if you're in a place where your financial security feels super precarious, you're not alone. And it's not your fault.